We know that criminal syndicates in South Africa like to get close to power, and they like to have a hold on the people and the policemen who are taking key decisions. So we know that that's the modus operandi, it's how they function. And all I can tell you is that if Mmusi had remained the leader, we would be a 10% party today. And he certainly hasn't done much in building an alternative.
Welcome, Helen Zille, Federal Chair of the DA, both sides.
Let me first say hello and thank you very much for having me on your show.
It's an explosive time in South Africa. A national police commissioner, a police minister, a commission of inquiry. Did you have any knowledge of this, or did you switch on the television like every other South African and you thought, and now?
Well, I, like every other South African, Randall, switched on the television and listened to the radio news, which is more the source of my news. And I was knocked between the eyes like every other South African. Not that I was too shocked and surprised, because we know what's happened before with Jackie Salibi and Glenn Adliotti and all that sort of thing. So we know that criminal syndicates in South Africa like to get close to power, and they like to have a hold on the people and the policemen who are taking key decisions. So we know that that's the modus operandi, it's how they function. It's still encouraging in South Africa that this can come out. And we must never just think that everything is as it seems, because at the moment these are allegations. And we also have an ANC elective conference coming up in the not too distant future. And people are positioning themselves now on different sides of the particular factions in the ANC. So we'll wait and see till hopefully a credible investigation produces an outcome.
That was my next question. What is your sense of the commission of inquiry? It's got to produce something within 3 months, but it has 6 months. And then there's going to be an incoming police minister with an academic background.
Look, there's a problem with appointing Professor Kachalia as the incoming police minister, because you can't have two police ministers at the same time. You can have you can have a deputy, or you can have another minister in the cabinet acting for the one the one minister. You can have one minister stepping aside and another minister in the cabinet taking up that position on a temporary basis, but you can't effectively have two ministers of police. So you can't have Minister Mtunu and then Minister Kachalia being both ministers of police. That's constitutionally unviable. So I do think the EFF's case has got merit, and they're probably going to win that case. And then that's going to create a problem for the president.
I'll start off with a softball. What made you enter politics? I mean, obviously, we all know your history and the Randall Abrahams and the Black Sash. But then, I mean, that was kind of politics and journalism. You then, in the new dispensation, you moved directly into politics. It's quite a different world.
Yes, Randall, it's a very different world. And the reason that I did that was quite by accident. I hadn't planned it or intended it. I was active on the school governing body of my kids' school, primary school. And then I was elected as chairperson of the governing body. And in that role, we had quite a substantial hand in the public participation process of the new South African Schools Act. And I did a lot of interaction with Professor Hunter at that time, Professor Peter Hunter, who was the key academic responsible for formulating the policy position in the South African Schools Act. And it was a good act. And then suddenly, Nelson Mandela came with this voluntary severance and redeployment scheme. And it was a scheme in which very substantial inducements were offered to teachers to leave the profession. and that other teachers would be put into the vacancies in the process of right sizing. So that meant that every school that had taken care to right size and get the right ratios of teachers to students would face the fact that their teachers, and often their best teachers, would be induced to leave the system. And then, without any regard to educational criteria, other teachers from wherever would be redeployed into their position as a kind of labor relations exercise. Now, you can't treat education in that way. And I then realized, because I've been very involved in the formulation of the South African Schools Act as a chair of the school governing body involved in public participation, I then said, no, this is impossible. We have to challenge this because it's against this new act that's just been passed. And so I mobilized 80 other schools who also were outraged by this. And we went to court and we won. And at that stage, I was doing a lot of writing for the newspapers because, of course, that was the first time in my life I'd been called racist because people didn't understand the issues. And immediately, because I was opposing the ANC, called me racist, which is complete nonsense. And I mobilized 80 schools. We took this case and we won it. And because I was writing so much in the newspapers about education policy, Tony Leon called me and said, would I like to look at the DP at the time? Would I like to look at their education policy and say what I thought of it? And I did do that, and it wasn't a very good policy. So I said, I'd like to rewrite your policy. So I did. And then when I'd finished doing that, it was adopted by the party. And then Tony asked me to put my hat in the ring to become an MPL in the provincial legislature of the Western Cape. And I thought about it, and I was working at UCT as the director of communications at the time. And I thought, well, why don't I just throw my hat in the ring and see? And I got elected. And I was lucky enough then, within 6 months of having been a mommy on the chair of the governing body, to become the MEC for education in the Western Cape. So that was the way
So
I
we've agreed that it's very, very different. But how did you experience it in the 90s? Because this is the first flowering of democracy. And, you become a parliamentarian. As I say, the world changes. But how does it change?
Well, the difficult thing was opposing the ANC because I'd always been a very strong supporter of the ANC right through the 1980s, and definitely when I was in the end conscription campaign in the Black Sash. And I started seeing the ANC in a completely different light, already at the end of the 1980s, but certainly at the beginning of the 1990s. And I saw that a lot of the things they claimed to stand for were really empty rhetoric and meaningless. And then I saw that an act passed in Parliament was also obviously meaningless. And I was very disillusioned because I went to Parliament to watch the debates on this act. And I saw ANC MPs coming there with their papers still in the envelope. They hadn't even opened the envelope, let alone read these very important papers. And they'd open the envelope when they got in there and they kind of desultory glance at them. And I'd watch this, I'd observe it very carefully and then look around, take no interest in the debate. There were two people who were really debating the issue and taking it up very hard. One was Mike Ellis of the DP, and one was Donald Lee of the old MNP. And they got it, and they were fighting for public schools to retain some kind of say of governing bodies over the staffing and the training and development at their schools. The ANC couldn't have cared less. The only time that most of the ANC members showed any sign of life was when the tea trolley came around or the food trolley came around. And I thought, is this how seriously people take it? And this was the party that I once supported. And they didn't have any time to listen to our serious arguments. Professor Bengu was the minister then, and he wasn't interested in the least. And that's when I got massively disillusioned. And I thought, huh, well, I'm going to start.
So you're either in or you're out.
Yeah. So then I decided, no, I'm definitely going to mobilize very hard and will the alternative to the ANC.
And now, many, many years later, you're considering the Mayor of Joburg position.
Well, I've first got to be nominated by my party. That's the first thing I've got to do. Of course, there's going to be a lot of negativity. I mean,
But why that particular role? Because I mean, you spoke about how you first entered politics and the difficulties you faced. I mean, Mayor of Joburg's it's a pretty difficult ride.
of course it is, and I've never
If we
looked
look
for
if we look at the people who've been there,
look,
it's been
I've never
challenging.
looked for easy rides, right? But the frontier is really through municipal politics. I realized that when I was in Parliament in 2004. I realized that change would have to come from the bottom up, not the top down. So I left and became the mayoral candidate for Cape Town, and we managed to get the mayoral position on a 7-party coalition, which was quite difficult. And we managed to see that through. And then we won the province, and the rest is history in the Western Cape. Now we need to do the same thing in Gauteng.
Well, at least one of your former colleagues, Herman Mashaba, is vehemently opposed.
Well, he would be, wouldn't he? I mean, when he was the mayor, he sided with the EFF to stay in power, and he became the EFF's mayor, essentially. And he facilitated huge land invasions and other things which were absolutely contrary to our policy. And so his own caucus was going to vote against him, and he somehow managed to blame me, as most people do. So,
You're going to have to spend a lot of time differentiating the DA in these elections that are coming up in 26, though. Because for the first time, you've been part of a coalition government, and it must be as difficult, I imagine, for the ANC and yourselves in figuring out this relationship. But now you have to run in order to win votes. So how do you go about differentiating the yet?
well, we're totally differentiated, actually, from every other party. I mean, on every single issue, we are differentiated from every other party. We believe in constitutionalism and the rule of law. The ANC can never claim to do that. We believe in non-racialism. No other party really claims to do that. We are a party for all South Africans. Very few other parties can claim that, in fact, none. We're a party that stands up against corruption and acts very hard on corruption. The ANC certainly can't claim to do that. So we are differentiated in every other way. And the big differentiator of ours in Gauteng is that we're the only party that can actually beat the ANC.
I'm going to ask about the profile, though, of the party. And that certainly, after Mmusi Maimane's departure, a lot of people would say it's taken a knock. So is the party and the candidates that are going to run coming 26 and 29, are things going to change? Because, I mean, you're the federal chair, but, you certainly can't hold that role forever. So how do you see the future? How do you see the next thing?
Well, all I can tell you is that if Mmusi had remained the leader, we would be a 10% party today. And he certainly hasn't done much in building an alternative. So, we haven't got a control group as it were. But I don't think the party took a knock. It took a temporary knock from the fourth estate, the chattering classes. And, I don't have much respect for political commentators in South Africa. They always inevitably get it wrong, and we prove them wrong again. So, we want to get things done. We're a party that believes in a political philosophy, and we implement that political philosophy because we believe that's the only political philosophy that can rescue South Africa. And so we're not obsessed by people's race and chromosomes and whatever, sexuality, whatever it is. People must get on with their lives. But if you want a position in the DA, you've really got to be able to step into those shoes and fulfill it. It's not about color, chromosomes, or in there.
So it might not be from a party perspective, but winning votes is a different question altogether.
Well, there are lots and lots of parties that have black leaders, if you want. I mean, there are over 100 that do. So if that was such a differentiating factor, they would obviously be the second biggest party or the first biggest party in South Africa. Why aren't they? Why aren't they? Why has Herman Mashaba, who did quite well in the 2021 local government election, plummeted to maybe 2% of the vote? Why have all the other black-led parties made absolutely no progress? And why is the ANC losing votes hand over fist? People want to see good government more. And that is the yardstick in South Africa.
So how do you imagine the outcome of the 26th election?
I don't know. I haven't got a crystal ball. And there
But you're,
is,
I mean, you're deep in it, so you
well, I'm
must have
deep in it. But
you
what
must
I'm,
have a
what
view.
I'm doing is I believe that I have the experience and the background and the toughness and the resilience to take on this extraordinarily difficult task of trying to help fix Joburg. Now, no one person can never do it on their own, but the team needs a leader, and the team needs a leader with a plan. And I've spent weeks now studying every last detail at Johannesburg, and I'm putting together a plan that I believe is credible. I've got to present it at the candidate selection panel. We'll see what they think. I've got very good opponents, and I might not even be the candidate. But I'm putting myself out there because I believe that it's absolutely essential to rescue Joburg. Joburg remains our financial capital, and the rest of the country hasn't got much hope if Joburg collapses. So we have a real obligation to do our best to rescue Johannesburg. If we're going to put together, obviously, a non-racial team, because the DA is the only profoundly non-racial party in South Africa. The only diverse party. I mean, the ANC's only got black people in it now. Even Carl Niehaus has vanished from the scene. You know, all the other parties are uniracial, effectively, except the DA. And so we'll go up there and we'll put together a good team that represents South Africa, that is competent, that is outstanding, that will have a vision and have a plan. And then it's over to the voters. We'll say to the voters, want to fix, want to rescue Joburg? Here's your best chance. And it's probably your last chance. So let's not squander it.
I said earlier that yourselves in the ANC inside a GNU, it's there's a first time for everything.
Mm-hmm.
But how has your relationship as federal chair changed with ministers inside the GNU? Because it's a difficult relationship, right? They have to work with the president and with their colleagues. They're ministers. They're acting in the interest of South Africa.
We all are, every one of us.
Well, but they have to work, as I say, alongside a party who, for a long time, had all the ministers,
Mm-hmm.
right? How's your relationship with those ministers changed?
Our ministers.
Yeah, the DA ministers.
Not at all. I mean, we believe in a separation between party and state. The ministers get on with ministering and doing their jobs, and I run the party.
But the life of a minister is quite different, though.
Yes, of course it is. But, I mean, John is still the leader of the DA and he's a minister. But my job is very clear. I run the party, and the ministers do the jobs in their portfolio that they are appointed to do. And it's much harder for the ANC. They don't know what hit them. I mean, they were able to take all of the decisions all on their own, and now they can't. But they don't know yet that they can't. They've never realized that they can't. And so we keep on saying, excuse me, but this is not a unilateral decision. Now they're very upset because we criticize them on foreign policy. And we say, foreign policy is not your bailiwick alone. Foreign policy is not for you to determine. You're in a co-governance arrangement with us. And they're going to get
And
used
the
to
other
that.
parties.
Well, no, because let me tell you why no. The other parties are there by grace and favor of the ANC. So they've got absolutely no leverage that they can apply to the ANC. If they don't agree with the ANC says goodbye, off you go, because they owe their positions to Cyril Ramaphosa. We owe our positions to the voters. The ANC can't form a government without us unless it was to form a government with the EFF and MK. So none of the parties that were brought in have any muscle. If they irritate the ANC, they'll be fired. We stand up very strongly against the ANC, as you know, all the time. And if they want to fire us, well, then they have to fall back on the EFF and MK. So we've got muscle by virtue of our size and by virtue of the voter support that we've got.
So what is your assessment of the political direction under the GNU? I mean, it's been a short space of time in the history of a democratic South Africa. But what do you think about the trajectory?
Look, it's difficult. the president tolerates all kinds of corruption in his cabinet, but fires a minister or a deputy minister of the DA who did exactly what he was supposed to do, applied to go overseas. The president did not do what he was supposed to do, which was reply to the letter. And then Andrew went and he was fired, although he did everything he was supposed to do. Now that earns a dismissal. And yet the cabinet is full of compromised people who just sit there. And it's this double standard that we don't like.
I want to go back to ask if the DA were to, at any stage, walk away from the G.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, it's been a turbulent first year, we can all agree.
Well, not as turbulent as it could have been, but yeah.
How do we, and the ANC then chooses to form a government with one of the other parties that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the voters who voted for the DA, how do you think they will assess the situation?
Well, they'll be much angry if we sit there and become a lapdog of the ANC. I mean, what killed the NNP was that they went into a government of national unity, which was a proper government of national unity, in 1995. They went into a proper government of national unity and got into the cabinet and were seen to be subordinates to the ANC and lost their voice completely and didn't ever stand up to the ANC. That's how you lose your supporters.
As federal chair, there's some commentators have said that behind the scenes you wield too much power. Is that possible?
What power?
Well,
the position has a lot of power. It's got a lot of power. It's a big position. But I don't take any power that isn't in the job description.
I want to, you were saying that voters would choose, based on delivery, as it were.
Well, more and more people are understanding that good government makes a difference in their lives.
Sure.
They know what it's like to live without water, without electricity, with potholed roads, with no safety, with electricity that goes down all the time. The rest of the country's recovered from load shedding. Joburg still has problems because of the local government reticulation network. No traffic lights. They understand what it means. And they understand what the flight of business and investment means. No jobs, huge burgeoning numbers of unemployed people, burgeoning crime. That is the result of bad government.
So then that leads me to think that you might imagine that in 2029 you'd pick up even more votes, and you imagine that the ANC is going to lose even more votes.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Because it's up to the voters of South Africa. All we can do as the DA is saying, we've got a policy, we've got a plan, we've got competent people. They're all chosen through merit selection. And we can get this done. We've got the best chance of getting this done. But it's up to you now. Do you want to fix your city or don't you want to fix your city? Because we can only give you a council candidate in every ward, and we will do that in every single ward. But if you want to carry on with more of the same, degradation, decline, economic collapse, it's over to the voters. This is a democracy.
And how then does the DA address, a very, very long period of historical injustice? How does that?
You will never address that without economic growth. That is the first requirement. If you've got a declining economy and people who have capital and skills leaving the country or all moving to the Western Cape, you're not going to have a rate space.
Lots of people moving back to Johannesburg.
No.
The figures show it.
Well, I look very carefully at the figures because I see
certainly from a property point of view, the property people will tell you that people are, moving
back
because they simply can't afford property in Cape Town.
And why can't they afford property? Because there's so much demand. If they could, why do you think it is? It's supply and demand. Right?
I think that there's a case to be made for the fact that foreigners have bought up properties at such extreme prices that this has affected the entire housing market in the Western Cape. And that's why, people are buying, let's say, even at the kind of million rand mark, are finding it difficult.
Yes. A lot of foreigners are bought on the Atlantic seaboard. That is true. But you know how much some of them pay us every month to live in their own houses? They pay 40,000 rand in rates alone.
Sure.
Every month to live in their own house.
Sure.
That's not the bond, that's nothing.
But
It's not their
but
water
this
and
this
electricity.
issue has come up across Europe. It's come up in New
I know,
Zealand.
but let me explain this to you. The amount they pay in rates enables the city of Cape Town to offer the most generous, free basic services package to poor people. So the point I'm making to you is this. If you don't have a rates base and if you don't have economic growth, you will never deal with the injustices of the past. And if you are going to pretend that you can destroy the economy and deal with the injustices of the past, you're only fooling yourself. And that's what the ANC is doing.
The world is going to be a very, very different place in 2029. The rise of AI, the significance of AI, the role it's going to play. How is that going to change politics and change the experience of South Africans?
Well, I dabble in AI. I mean, I'll write an article and say to AI, what do you think of this? And then I'll never get an article from AI and then use it, never. But I'll write an article, I'll put it in AI, and it often improves it. Or I will say to AI, please can you look for every mention of public-private partnerships in 5 acts of parliament, because I want to know what we can do and what we can't do. And it finds it in an instant. I say to AI, what are the differences between Public Procurement Act and the Municipal Systems Act and the Municipal Systems Act and the MFMA, the Municipal Finance Management Act? Please find out what they say, compare them, and does the one supersede the other? I would have to spend like a day plowing my way through those acts. It goes whoops, 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 and there it is. So it's a fantastic tool if you use it properly and if you know how to use it. The key thing about AI is you've got to get the instructions right. And you've got to get the brief right. And if you get the brief right, you'll get a product that is usable at the end. And then you have to apply a human mind to what comes out the other end to check the facts, to check the presentation, to check all of that. So at the moment, with the AI that I'm dabbling with, a human being is still very much needed. But I think at the scale and at the pace that AI is going to become cleverer and cleverer and cleverer because it integrates more and more information into its systems, there is a risk of AI becoming very, very risky to human functioning. I read the biography of Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson, and Elon Musk certainly believes it has huge risks, unlike Larry Page from Google, who doesn't think the risks are so great. I'm more on Elon's side about the risks of AI, but I think it's here to stay. That genie is out of the bottle, and we're going to have to look at ways of harnessing it and staying one step ahead of it. And for now, if you use it sensibly and rationally, it is a fantastic tool, but it is a nightmare for teachers, a nightmare, because it's critical for a child to learn to think, to grapple with resources, to try and write something, to get it wrong, to try and write again, to do comparisons, to do deductions, to do analysis. If you can do that, like I can, because I went through school and journalism and all of that, I can do that. So I do it, and then I ask AI what it thinks of it. And then AI comes and tells me, this is a good piece, or this, have you thought of this angle, or you should add this point, and then you can integrate that. But if you're saying, write me an essay on the Second World War, and out it comes out of the AI, and you're handing that in as your project with a few changed words, it's a disaster for education. And my son and my daughter-in-law are involved in education, and they see the tremendous dumbing down of children who are not learning these basic skills that they need to learn.
But from an economic point of view, I'm thinking, as I say, like most politicians, you hope to win more votes. So if you have greater power come the 2029 election, it's certainly going to have to be something that, as you said, is going to have to be harnessed. We've certainly seen countries that have harnessed AI moving swiftly ahead. We've certainly seen a chip war taking place because AI is going to be so dramatically significant. So certainly it's something for everyone, certainly in a position of power, to apply their minds to in our country, as you say, either to manage it well or to harness it for the future.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, economically, people are going to have to get into it completely. And they're going to have to understand it and harness it and take it to the next level. We've got to use it as the next stage of evolution. I mean, when I grew up in South Africa, there was no television. There was certainly no cell phones. There was certainly no internet, no Google. I tell my grandchildren, listen, they look at me and they say, how did you live? I said, very happily. And I'm very glad that their parents apply limits to screen time and stuff, so they also know how to be kids and play. But it's the next stage of human evolution, and the digital divide can become much bigger and bigger. That's why I put such a stress on connectivity for all our schools in the Western Cape when I was the NEC there. So it's incredibly important to be able to have the resources through economic growth and through development to be able to get everyone connected in this country.
I want to take you back to 2015 when you returned to this role in the DA. Was it a case of unfinished business?
2019.
Sorry.
No problem. Look, the party was unraveling very fast. And we were losing votes, and we were losing members, and there was a lot of disillusionment. Obviously, not amongst the chatterati, because, they only saw race at the time. It was the time of Eusebius Kaiser and critical race theory, and all of these people coming out of universities have been captured by this ideology, which is a disastrous ideology, which is why I wrote my book, Stay Woke, Go Broke, because anybody that goes into that direction just disintegrates. But the whole of the media were going in that direction. And the party was. That was the worst of all. And so I thought, well, I spent my life building up this party. I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and watch it disintegrate. So this is now a vacant position. I want to throw my hat in the ring and compete for it. And I didn't. I won it.
And so it was a case of keeping the party together, or it was a case of your own unfinished business?
No, my own unfinished business. I mean, I didn't want to sit there and see the party disintegrate. What was my whole life about? It was going to go into a direction of an ideology that was completely contrary to everything that we stood for.
But those questions have certainly not gone away.
They're getting away. We're past peak woke. People are seeing how insane that was. They're seeing that Donald Trump was the consequence of it. He's certainly not the antidote to it, but he was the consequence of it. And thank goodness we managed to hold our backbone. The Democratic Party in the United States never did, which is why they're in such a mess today. They went completely woke. All of the liberal parties all over the globe that have collapsed now is because they couldn't hold their backbone. We held our backbone. And that is why we're one of the very, very few liberal parties worldwide that is growing. And we're the 12th biggest liberal party in the whole world. And that was because we held our backbone, we stuck to our principles, we fought our corner, we didn't collapse into wokeness and critical race theory. We're one of the very few that did. And it was the right thing to do.
It's still, as I say, going to be a case in 2019 that we're going to have to think about that, because certainly, there are other parties in South Africa that have grown very, very quickly
MKU.
and that are quite obviously different from yourselves.
Of course.
And I think that, as I say, I think you're 100% in saying you don't have a crystal ball. I don't think anybody does.
Well, let me tell you, I know enough about politics to tell you that there are three things a political party needs to survive. And again, I will tell you that the DA is the only party that's got those three things. The first thing is you need a very clear political philosophy that is the ground, underlying, fundamental, the bedrock of everything you do, and that you can default to in every single situation. The DA has that. Secondly, you need a very strong organization that functions according to its constitution and to the rules and follows due process. So in politics, there's a lot of contestation. There are a lot of outcomes that people don't like. And if you believe the process was fair, you'll accept an outcome that you don't like. The DA is the only party that has strong internal systems and structures and processes and a viable organization countrywide that works according to them. That's the second thing. The third thing is you've got to be able to attract good talent from all age groups and from all backgrounds. And again, the DA is the only party that can do that.
What do you do after the DA?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was going to go into the sunset in 2019 when my term as premier ended. I thought, great, I'll be a granny, I'll do X and Y and do what I want now. But when I saw what was happening to the party, I couldn't. I said to my husband, I'm thinking of running for chair of federal council. He says, are you crazy? I said, I can't sit back and just watch it disintegrate. He said, no, but we're going to go and do this and have a retirement.
And
do
now
that."
for the position of Mayor of Johannesburg.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess my question then is, as I say, at what stage do you feel, um, no more politics?
Well,
Are you a granny?
I call this my
Cook
midlife crisis.
breakfast every day.
I call this my midlife crisis. I mean, my husband, the last thing he wants is to have me home all day. I've got far too much energy. I don't think he would particularly welcome that. But, Johannesburg's very tired. I'm not. And we need to help fix it. And as I say, I've got the energy, I've got the enthusiasm, I've got the resilience, and I've still got the drive. And when you've got enough of all why, you'll overcome any how.
So you're not going to tell me what you're going to do.
I don't know yet. I mean, how am I supposed to know? That's
You
in the
don't
future.
have that vision at all.
I've never ever thought in 10 years' time in my life, that's where I want to be. I know what I want to do for South Africa. But as doors open, I think, oh, this is what I could do next. This is maybe how I could help. This is maybe what is needed. And look at my opportunities.
Great. And thank you for joining us.
That's a great pleasure.